Update changes the Warriors. Locker room reaction. Plus, what this means for the team. If you're a Warriors fan, I know what it's like. You open your phone to check the news and come away with the feeling that something changes every day, and the team never seems to catch on. It makes you tired, right? Today, I'm going to show you what this update really changed inside, how the locker room reacted, what this says about the mood of the squad, and mainly, what changes in the game from now on. No empty headlines and no gratuitous drama. I will separate fact from noise, explain the real impact, and in the end, you will leave with a clear map of what to expect from the Warriors in the next matches. Let's go. Before I tell you the detail that caught the most attention in the locker room and what it changes for the Warriors, quickly, if you like direct, no-nonsense content and want to stay up to date with the team's news, subscribe to the channel now and leave a like. It's literally the quickest way for you to tell me, bring more Warriors while I'm here. Activate the bell, too, because when updates come out, sometimes everything changes in hours and you don't want to be last. Did it close? So comment below, I believe, or I already did. I want to see how your confidence is in the Warriors today. Now stay with me because in a little while, I'm going to show you the point that no one is talking about, and that can explain a lot of what we're seeing on the court. Let's do it. Welcome to Warriors Family TV. I like to start like this, simply, because anyone who really follows the Golden State Warriors knows we're not here just to see the score. We are here because this team is part of the routine, the mood of the day, the conversation with friends, that quick check on the cell phone to see what happened now. And honestly, it's been a while since I felt the environment was so different. It's not a change that you can point your finger at in a single move or in a single interview. It's more like when you walk into a room and notice that the atmosphere is charged, even without anyone saying anything. You feel like something is moving inside. I want to talk to you about this calmly, eye to eye, because the next few weeks could be decisive for the course of the season and, more than that, for the direction of the franchise in the short term. The Warriors have always been a team that, when they decide to act, don't act halfway. And when it comes to the title window with Stephen Curry still delivering at an absurd level, the word complacency simply does not exist in this organization's vocabulary. The question that remains in the air is not whether the team will move. The question is how far the team would be willing to go if a real opportunity arises. I follow the daily lives of this cast closely, not just the games, but the patterns, the rotations that change, the way that combinations on the court work one night and lock up the next, the body language when the game gets tight. And then you start to see what the fans feel, but sometimes they can't put it into words. The Warriors have brilliant moments. They have peaks that remind them of their winning identity, but they also have an irregularity that bothers them. You look at Curry, see him creating space out of nowhere, making the defense bend just with the threat of the shot, and think, this cannot be wasted, because Curry continues to be the type of player who changes the geometry of the game. He makes the court seem bigger for those who play with him and smaller for those who score. But basketball is not a simple sum of talents. It's fit, it's consistency, it's health, it's collective trust. And that's where the fans' pain lies. The feeling that the team is not that far from being dangerous, but also not as solid as it would need to get through the postseason safely. In 1 week, the Warriors showed a suffocating defense for stretches and beautiful offensive movement. In the other, the intensity drops, the execution fluctuates, and we feel again that something is missing. And when a team with a dynasty history starts to feel like something is missing, the board doesn't ignore it. She watches, she measures, she tries, and if necessary, she cuts her own flesh. I always try to bring an honest analysis here, without turning everything into drama and without selling fantasy as certainty. So let me tell you clearly, there are rumors, projections, and behind-the-scenes conversations circulating around the league, and one of them involves a name that, when it appears in a sentence, makes any fan stop what they are doing. A name that doesn't enter the market every day, nor in every decade. A name that, if it ever becomes available, changes the entire NBA board. I'm talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo. Just saying that, I know that a lot of people already react in two ways. There are those who get excited right away and start imagining the uniform, the transition, the pick and roll with Curry. And there are those who stop and say, it can't be done. It's impossible. It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense. I understand both sides, because yes, it is a difficult scenario. It's a gigantic movement. The cost would be high. But it's also true that the mere existence of this type of conversation says a lot about the Warriors' moment. A team only places itself at this table when it believes it can still fight at the top, and when it knows it has a star who deserves, at the very least, a real attempt to maximize its chance at the title. Before going into the what-ifs, I like to take a step back, because the Warriors in recent years have made a pattern clear. When the season shows signs of a limit, the organization evaluates aggressive paths. Fans can argue whether each attempt was perfect, but the mentality is there. And that's why, when a projection or rumor involving a star the size of Giannis appears, we can't simply dismiss it as a joke. Sometimes the league starts with a theoretical conversation, and next thing you know, the pieces start to move, and what seemed distant becomes a real negotiation. Now, for an exchange of this size to exist, it needs two things: assets that interest the other side and salaries that make the math work. And this is where a delicate point comes in, which many people avoid talking about out of affection for the player, but which is part of professional sport. There are players who are not being questioned for performance or effort, but who become pieces simply because their financial position and market value facilitate a big move. It's emotionally unfair, but that's how the NBA works. And in this type of scenario, a name that starts to appear as a possibility is Buddy Hield. I want to talk about him with respect because he is exactly the type of player that every coach likes to have around. Professional, useful, capable of punishing the defense on the perimeter, someone who enters the court with a clear role and tries to execute it. Buddy helps with space, helps keep the attack breathing when Curry rests or when the marking closes. It has value, and that's important. But, paradoxically, having value is precisely what makes a player tradable when a star enters the radar, because a big exchange needs real value going away. And Buddy, because he is a recognized pitcher and because he has a contract that can serve as a bridge, becomes a name that appears in hypothetical discussions easily. But let me tell you what's behind this subject, beyond names and spreadsheets. What's behind it is a question the Warriors need to answer internally. What's the most responsible way to honor Curry's current moment? Because he still delivers elite games. He still carries the attention of the entire league. He still gives you a chance to win any night. But time forgives no one, and the NBA doesn't wait. The window does not warn you when it is going to close. It just closes. And when you realize it, it's gone. Imagine for a second the board's point of view. You have a legend still operating at an absolute star level. You have a cast with useful parts, with youth trying to grow, with veterans who have already made history. You also have real limitations, age in some positions, inconsistency in others, and competition in the West that doesn't give discounts. What do? Do you keep everything as is and bet that chemistry will resolve itself? Or do you consider that perhaps the ceiling of this squad, as it stands, is not enough to go all the way? It's a heavy decision, because neither option is comfortable. And then, when the idea of a Curry plus Giannis duo comes up, the fan's brain starts racing. Because in pure basketball terms, it's a scary combination. Curry is the greatest shooter who ever lived. A player who punishes the slightest distraction and who forces any defense to stretch the limit. Giannis is a physical and athletic force who, when he accelerates towards the rim, changes the game like few others. Now think about the defensive dilemmas. If the defense rises too much to protect the perimeter and doesn't let Curry breathe, you give Giannis space to attack with a free lane. If you collapse into the paint to hold Giannis, you offer angles and seconds of freedom that Curry turns into 3 points with cruel naturalness. It's the type of duo that makes the opponent choose poison. But this same idea comes with a price. And I'm not just talking about draft picks, which would already be many. I'm talking about identity, a package that, in media projections and behind-the-scenes conversations, usually includes names like Draymond Green and Jonathan Kuminga, as well as picks and complimentary contracts. And that's when the conversation gets really serious, because Draymond is not just any player. He is, for many people, the defensive soul of this era. He's the guy who organizes, who talks, who bothers, who pulls the team into the game when the energy drops. Removing Draymond is changing one of the dynasty's cultural pillars. It's not just losing a defender, it's changing how the Warriors recognize themselves on the court. And Kuminga? Kuminga is prom. This is a physical engine. He is the future. He is the type of athlete that the franchise tries to hone to be the bridge between eras. Negotiating Kuminga means, in a certain sense, accepting that the future becomes currency to guarantee the present. And this is the most painful trade-off a team can make, choosing the now with so much conviction that you give away part of tomorrow. But, at the same time, there is a harsh logic that exists in the NBA. The future is important, but when you have a Curry active, the present has a special weight. The Warriors have already lived the full dream. Fans know what it's like to lift a trophy. And precisely because we know what it's like, it becomes more difficult to accept the idea of letting it go while there's still a chance. I like to put things into perspective because the fans deserve that. An exchange of this size is not a video game. It changes the entire rotation. You don't just lose Buddy, you lose depth. You lose pieces that hold minutes. You lose options when someone gets hurt. You lose flexibility. In return, you gain talent so great that you can make up for some of it yourself. But there is no miracle. The team still needs a functional squad around it. They need people who defend, who shoot when the ball is available, who can handle the playoff rhythm. Need health, needs quick rapport, and you need time, which is precisely the scarcest resource when the season is underway. So what I want you to understand here with me without rushing is that this type of rumor is not just hot news. He is a symptom. The symptom that the Warriors are at a crossroads point. Either they trust that the current path, with minor adjustments, is enough to make a real run, or they consider a move that alters the team's history. And when I say history, I'm talking about something on the scale of turning the rest of the Curry era into one last big try, with a partner at the highest level possible. Now, I need to be responsible and repeat. This, today, is a projected scenario. It is a possibility. It is a conversation that exists in the league and gains strength when big names come on the agenda. It does not mean that there is a formal proposal on the table. It doesn't mean that Milwaukee will decide to give up a player of that caliber. It doesn't mean the Warriors are about to flip a switch. But it means that if this button exists, the organization will at least put its finger on it. Because franchises competing for titles cannot pretend that a chance like that doesn't exist. They analyze, they probe, they calculate, they ask. And sometimes the answer is no, but sometimes the answer is, let's try. And then we return to Buddy Hield, because the human story of this conversation also matters. Imagine the mind of a player who arrives, fits in, plays his role, tries to gain space, buys into the idea of the system, and suddenly finds himself in the middle of speculation that has nothing to do with having played poorly. It's the cold part of the sport. And I always try to remember this when I talk about exchanges. On the other side, there is a person, there is a family, there is a career, there is adaptation. But the NBA doesn't stop to respect feelings. She respects windows, assets, numbers, and chances. And the Warriors, being the Warriors, will always be at the center of these conversations when the opportunity involves a star. Because everyone knows that Golden State, when it decides to bite, bites hard. Now, I want to bring you to the fan side, because I know that you who are listening to me feel a mixture of things. There's anxiety, there's hope, there's fear of losing idols, there's a desire to see the team become that inevitable monster again, there's fatigue from inconsistency, and there is also something that we don't talk about much, but that weighs heavily, the longing for control. That period when you entered a playoff series with the feeling that if the game got close, the Warriors knew exactly what to do. Today, sometimes, it seems like the team is still looking for that certainty. And when a team looks for certainty, it starts to consider shortcuts. And a star like Giannis is the greatest shortcut there is because he gives you an immediate impact. But I also want to tell you, there is no perfect decision here. If the Warriors do nothing, the criticism will be, they lacked courage. If you do something huge and it goes wrong, they will say, they dismantled the identity. If you do it and it works, it becomes genius. That's why I always like watching the tracks. And an important clue is, the board will look at what it believes it needs to win for a playoff series. It's not winning a beautiful game on a Tuesday. It's about surviving adjustments, fouls, different opponents, different styles, bad nights. It's having the kind of strength that can last a marathon. Curry and Giannis together give you a strength that changes any series, but the cost can leave you vulnerable in other areas, and that's when the conversation turns to chess. You give up Draymond and suddenly you need a new defensive brain. You give up Kuminga and lose a body lactic that can be important against certain opponents. You give up choices and reduce your ability to reinvent yourself later. In return, you radically increase the ceiling of now. It's a choice between two fears: the fear of trying and losing what you love, and the fear of not trying and realizing later that it was your last chance. If you ask me what feeling I have when I look at all of this, I tell you honestly, I feel like the Warriors are getting ready to make a big decision, even if the final decision is to stay, because even deciding to stay requires conviction. Staying is also choosing, and choosing requires knowing exactly what you have and what you don't have. And today, the Warriors appear to be taking this internal assessment much more seriously than in other recent phases. The environment turns on signals of urgency, and urgency, when it finds opportunity, becomes movement. I want you to follow this with me here at Warriors Family TV in the right way, without panic, without fantasy sold as truth, but also without ignoring the size of what could be brewing. If the conversation about Giannis gains momentum, it changes the entire market. It changes the price of other stars. It pushes other teams to act. It puts pressure on Milwaukee to decide which direction to go. And it puts the Warriors in the eye of the storm, because with Curry still shining, Golden State is a destination that everyone mentions when talking about the last piece for a title. Now I'm going to ask you something really, like someone talking to someone who understands the soul of this team. Think calmly about what you would do. Would you trade depth, future, and perhaps a piece of identity to try to form a historic duo? Would you accept seeing Draymond in another uniform if it meant greatly increasing the chance of another championship in the Curry era? Would you give up Kuminga and first-round picks for an immediate impact? Or do you feel the Warriors can still find a way forward with smaller adjustments, more patience, and internal growth? There is no right answer that works for everyone, but there is an honest answer, and that's what I want to read from you. Because this discussion is not just about names, it's about what you believe this team is, and what you want it to be in the final chapter of this era. We have the privilege of having seen history. We saw the Warriors change the NBA, and now we are living in a moment where the franchise can choose how it tries to write the next part. It could be with continuity, it could be with a bold bet. But whatever the path, it will say a lot about how the organization views Curry's time. I will continue to follow every detail, every sign, every report, every movement that seems small but could be the first piece falling. And when I have something concrete, I will bring it here with the responsibility you deserve. Until then, I want you to stay with me, because this type of matter cannot be resolved in a day. It evolves. It takes shape. He changes direction. And when the bomb goes off, it almost always explodes for anyone who was paying attention beforehand. So if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. I make a point of building this channel as an ongoing conversation, because that's what rooting for the Warriors is. It's emotion, it's analysis, it's hope, it's demand, it's pride, it's memory, and it's the desire to see another remarkable chapter. And if there is a chance to put the Warriors back in the thick of the title race at full strength, you can be sure of one thing: this franchise will look at that chance with eyes wide open. Now I want to hear you. Write in the comments, in your own way. But honestly, would you make this change if it were possible? Would you put everything on the table for Giannis alongside Curry? Or do you prefer to protect your identity and try to find your way with what already exists? I will read the messages, because I want to understand where our community is in this conversation. And above all, it stays here, because when the tide starts to change in the Bay Area, it doesn't change slowly. She changes all at once. Strength in numbers. And that's exactly why I tell you, what's happening now is not just another rumor lost in the middle of the season. It's one of those moments when the franchise stops, looks in the mirror, and decides who it wants to be from now on. Because when the entire league starts whispering giant names, the Warriors can't afford to pretend they didn't hear. If there is a real chance to change the course of this season, and perhaps the immediate future, that chance will pass quickly. And when it passes, there's no point coming back here later and saying it was obvious. The obvious in the NBA only appears when it has already happened. So stay tuned. Any movement, any sign, any detail that seems small could be the missing piece for this puzzle to explode once and for all. And if this story really moves towards a major movement NDE, you'll want to have followed from the beginning, because that's how we understand the context, separate facts from noise, and see what's behind the decisions. Now I want you with me in the next step. In the pinned comment, there is my playlist, Warriors Analyses. Click there and watch the sequence, because I organized it for you to understand the complete picture, cast, rotation, behind the scenes, possibilities, and what each scenario really changes. If you want to be one step ahead, this is where you start. And tell me below, would you go all in, or would you hold the core? I will read everything. That's what Warriors Family TV is. We discuss together with a cool head and a warm heart. See you in the next video, and remember, strength in numbers.